and welcome to IBEX Friends. Today we discuss domestic systemically important banks. RBI has categorized three banks as domestic systemically important banks. It's State Bank of India, ICICI Bank, and HDFC Bank. Let's understand what is a systemically important bank. Systemically important banks are perceived as banks that are too big to fail. The perception of too big to fail creates an expectation that there will be government support for these banks at the time of distress. This perception gives these banks an advantage in the funding market. In order to reduce the risk and probability of distress in future and dependence on government during distress times, these systemically important banks are subjected to additional measures like additional requirement of capital. The systemically important banks are given score based upon their size, interconnectedness, substitutability, and complexity. Based upon this score, the banks are plotted into four different buckets, and depending upon their placement, they are required to have additional common equity tier 1 capital, which ranges from 0.20% to 0.80% of their risk-weighted assets. The current categorization of Indian systemic important banks is based upon data as on 31st March 2022. These three banks are required to provide additional common equity tier 1 capital as under: State Bank of India 0.60% of its risk-weighted assets, ICICI Bank 0.20% of its risk-weighted assets, and HDFC also 0.20% of its risk-weighted assets. The origin of systemically important banks. The Financial Stability Board recommended that all the nations who are its members, they shall have a framework to reduce risk attributable to systemically important financial institutions. Thereafter, the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision came out with a framework in November 2011 for identifying the global systemically important banks, also called GSIBs. That's all about systemically important banks from IBEX. For meritorious success in bank promotions and interview and group discussions, visit us at www.excelbanking.co.in or WhatsApp at 9463360038. Thanks and stay connected.